Krishna everyone, and welcome back to the live studios here in Radha Lane. You're in the right place at the right time. Right next to Shri Radha Nilamadava's gorgeous temple, ISKCON of Houston. We've got a room full of eager seekers and hearers of the Srimad-Bhagavatam tonight, and all of you also. Now, I have a little bit of an announcement to make. Our tech researchers over here have determined that sometimes when there seems to be a break in the connection and you go to and listen to the recording from the beginning, there's no break. And sometimes there is, and we haven't figured out exactly what that is, but to be safe, if you're disappointed and you're watching live and there seems to be some transmission difficulties, you can go back and listen to the same recording from the beginning, and most of the time you'll be able to hear and see the whole thing without any interruptions. But yesterday it appeared there were interruptions even on the recording. So I'm going to work on that. And in the meantime, Hare Krishna. Welcome to the tech world. Can you imagine what's going to happen to the world when the tech just breaks down altogether or the electricity stops? Hare Krishna. Yeah, we still have hardbound books. That's why Prabhupada wanted us to distribute them. And one of the reasons we are doing this every night is to inspire everyone out there to share, and not just share the digital files, but also share the books with your friends. Okay. So now let's hear the glorious, beautiful glorification of Srimad-Bhagavatam by Sanatana Goswami. And it goes like this. Sarva Shastabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of light to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidvandoditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadaya Te Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nistadaka Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu saduta dayin atini chochatakara hanamun chagadachin mam premnarit gandayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, the Brahmins, astrologers, are giving a glimpse into the life of Pariksit Maharaj, who has just appeared, just born. And we will continue to hear chapter 12 of Canto 1, beginning with text 27. After hearing about his death, which will be caused by the bite of a snake bird sent by the son of a Brahmana, he will get himself freed from all material attachment and surrender unto the personality of Godhead, taking shelter in him, taking shelter of him. Purport. Material attachment and taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord go ill together. Material attachment means ignorance of transcendental happiness under the shelter of the Lord. Devotional service to the Lord, while existing in the material world, is a way to practice one's transcendental relation with the Lord, and when it is matured, one gets completely free from all material attachment and becomes competent to go back home, back to Godhead. Maharaj Pariksit, being especially attached to the Lord from the beginning of his body in the womb of his mother, was continuously under the shelter of the Lord, and the so-called warning of his death within 7 days from the date of the curse by the Brahmana's son was a boon to him, to enable him to prepare himself to go back home, back to Godhead. Since he was always protected by the Lord, he could have avoided the effect of such a curse by the grace of the Lord, but he did not take such undue advantage for nothing. Rather, he made the best use of a bad bargain. For 7 days continuously, he heard Srimad-Bhagavatam from the right source, and thus he got shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord by this opportunity. Text 28. After inquiring about proper self-knowledge from the great philosopher's son of Vyasadeva, he will renounce all material attachment and achieve a life of fearlessness. Purport. Material knowledge means ignorance of the knowledge of one's own self. Philosophy means to seek after the right knowledge of one's own self, or the knowledge of self-realization. Without self-realization, philosophy is dry speculation or a waste of time and energy. Srimad-Bhagavatam gives the right knowledge of one's own self, and by hearing Srimad-Bhagavatam, one can get free from material attachment and enter into the kingdom of fearlessness. This material world is fearfulness. This material world is fearfulness. Its prisoners are always fearful, as within a prison house. In the prison house, no one can violate the jail rules and regulations, and violating the rules means another term for extension of prison life. Similarly, we in this material existence are always fearful. This fearfulness is called anxiety. Everyone in the material life, in all species and varieties of life, is full of anxieties, either by breaking or without breaking the laws of nature. Liberation, or mukti, means getting relief from these constant anxieties. This is possible only when the quality of anxiety is changed by the devotional service of the Lord. Srimad-Bhagavatam gives us the chance to change the quality of anxiety from matter to spirit. This is done in the association of a learned philosopher like the self-realized Shukadeva Goswami, the great son of Sri Vyasadeva. Maharaj Pariksit, after receiving warning of his death, took advantage of this opportunity by association with Shukadeva Goswami and achieved the desired result. There is a sort of imitation of this reciting and hearing of Srimad-Bhagavatam by professional men, and their foolish audience thinks that they will get free from the clutches of material attachment and attain the life of fearlessness. Such imitative hearing of Srimad-Bhagavatam is a caricature only, and one should not be misled by such a performance of Bhagavatam Saptaha, undertaken by ridiculous, greedy fellows to maintain an establishment of material enjoyment. Text 29. Those who were expert in astrological knowledge and in performance of the birth ceremony instructed King Yudhishthira about the future history of the child. Then, being sumptuously remunerated, they all returned to their respective homes. Purport. The Vedas are the storehouse of knowledge, both material and spiritual. But such knowledge aims at perfection of self-realization. In other words, the Vedas are the guides for the civilized man in every respect. Since human life is the opportunity to get free from all material miseries, it is properly guided by the knowledge of the Vedas in the matters of both material needs and spiritual salvation. The specific intelligent class of men who were devoted particularly to the knowledge of the Vedas were called the Vipras, or the graduates of the Vedic knowledge. There are different branches of knowledge in the Vedas, of which astrology and pathology are two important branches necessary for the common man. So the intelligent men, generally known as the Brahmanas, took up all the different branches of Vedic knowledge to guide society. Even the Department of Military Education, Dhanurveda, was also taken up by such intelligent men, and the Vipras were also teachers of this section of knowledge, as were Dronacharya, Kripacharya, and so on. The word Vipra mentioned herein is significant. There is a little difference between the Vipras and the Brahmanas. The Vipras are those who are expert in karma kanda, or fruitive activities, guiding the society towards fulfilling the material necessities of life, whereas the Brahmanas are expert in spiritual knowledge of transcendence. This department of knowledge is called Jnanakanda, and above this there is the Upasana Kanda. The culmination of Upasana Kanda is the devotional service of Lord Vishnu, and when the Brahmanas achieve perfection, they are called Vaishnavas. Vishnu worship is the highest of the modes of worship. Elevated Brahmanas are Vaishnavas engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, and thus Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is the science of devotional service, is very dear to the Vaishnavas. And as explained in the beginning of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, it is the mature fruit of Vedic knowledge and is superior subject matter above the three khandas, namely karma kanda, or karma, jnana, and upasana. Amongst the karma kanda experts, the expert Jataka Vipras were good astrologers who could tell all the future history of a born child simply by the astral calculations of the time, lagna. Such expert Jataka Vipras were present during the birth of Maharaj Pariksit, and his grandfather, Maharaj Yudhishthira, awarded the Vipras sufficiently with gold, land, villages, grains, and other valuable necessaries of life, which also include cows. There is a need of such Vipras in the social structure, and it is the duty of the state to maintain them comfortably as designed in the Vedic procedure. Such expert Vipras, being sufficiently paid by the state, could give free service to the people in general, and thus this department of Vedic knowledge could be available for all. Text 30. The child would become famous in the world as Pariksit, examiner, because he would come to examine all human beings in his search after that personality whom he saw before his birth. Thus he would come to constantly contemplate him. Purport. Maharaj Pariksit, fortunate as he was, got the impression of the Lord even in the womb of his mother, and thus his contemplation on the Lord was constantly with him. Once the impression of the transcendental form of your Lord is fixed in one's mind, one can never forget him in any circumstance. Child Pariksit, after coming out of the womb, was in the habit of examining everyone to see whether he was the same personality whom he first saw in the womb. But no one could be equal to or more attractive than the Lord, and therefore he never accepted anyone. But the Lord was constantly with him by such examination, and thus Maharaj Pariksit was always engaged in the devotional service of the Lord by remembrance. Srila Jiva Goswami remarks in this connection that every child, if given an impression of the Lord from his very childhood, especially or certainly becomes a great devotee of the Lord, like Maharaj Pariksit. One may not be as fortunate as Maharaj Pariksit to have the opportunity to see the Lord in the womb of his mother, but even if he is not so fortunate, he can be made so if the parents of the child desire him to be so. There is a practical example in my personal life in this connection. My father was a pure devotee of the Lord, and when I was only 4 or 5 years old, my father gave me a couple of forms of Radha and Krishna. In a playful manner, I used to worship these deities along with my sister, and I used to imitate the performances of a neighboring temple of Radha Govinda. By constantly visiting this neighboring temple and copying the ceremonies in connection with my own deities of play, I developed a natural affinity for the Lord. My father used to observe all the ceremonies befitting my position. Later on, these activities were suspended due to my association in the schools and colleges, and I became completely out of practice. But in my youthful days, when I met my spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, again I revived my old habit, and the same playful deities became my worshipful deities in proper regulation. This was followed up until I left the family connection, and I am pleased that my generous father gave the first impression which was developed later into regulative devotional service by his divine grace. Maharaj Prahlad also advised that such impressions of a godly relation must be impregnated from the beginning of childhood. Otherwise, one may miss the opportunity of the human form of life, which is very valuable, although it is temporary, like others. Text 31. As the moon, in its waxing fortnight, develops day after day, so the royal prince, Pariksit, very soon developed luxuriantly under the care and full facilities of his guardian grandfathers. Text 32. Just at this time, King Yudhishthira was considering performing a horse sacrifice to get freed from sins incurred from fighting with kinsmen. But he became anxious to get some wealth, for there were no surplus funds outside of fines and tax collection. That the funds were all taken from in the battle of Kurukshetra, the war chest. Purport. As the Brahmanas and Vipras had a right to be subsidized by the state executive head had the right to collect taxes and fines from the citizens. After the battle of Kurukshetra, the state treasury was exhausted, and therefore there were no surplus funds except the funds from tax collection and fines. Such funds were sufficient only for the state budget, and having no excess funds, the king was anxious to get more wealth in some way or other in order to perform the horse sacrifice. Maharaj Yudhishthira wanted to perform this sacrifice under the instruction of Bhishmadeva. Text 33. understanding the hearty wishes of the king, his brothers, as advised by the infallible Lord Krishna, collected sufficient riches from the north, left by King Maruta. Purport. Maharaj Maruta, one of the great emperors of the world. He reigned over the world long before the reign of Maharaj Yudhishthira. He was the son of Maharaj Avikshit and was a great devotee of the sun god, known as Yamaraj. His brother Samvarta was a rival priest of the great Brihaspati, the learned priest of the demigods. He conducted one sacrifice called Sankara Yagya, by which the Lord was so satisfied that he was pleased to hand over to him the charge of a mountain peak of gold. This peak of gold is somewhere in the Himalaya mountains, and modern adventurers may try to find it there. And I'm sure that a lot have died trying. He was so powerful an emperor that at the day's end of sacrifice, the demigods from the other planets like Indra, Chandra, and Brihaspati used to visit his palace. And because he had the gold peak at his disposal, he had sufficient gold in his possession. The canopy of the sacrificial altar was completely made of gold. In his daily performances of sacrificial ceremonies, some of the inhabitants of the Vayuloka, airy planets, were invited to expedite the cooking work of the ceremony. And the assembly of the demigods in the ceremony was led by Vishwadeva. By his constant pious work, he was able to drive out all kinds of diseases from the jurisdiction of his kingdom. All the inhabitants of higher planets like Devaloka and Pitriloka were pleased with him for his great sacrificial ceremonies. Every day he used to give in charity to the learned brahmanas such things as bedding, seats, conveyances, and sufficient quantities of gold. Because of munificent charities and performances of innumerable sacrifices, the king of heaven, Indradeva, was fully satisfied with him and always wished for his welfare. Due to his pious activities, he remained a young man throughout his life and reigned over the world for 1,000 years, surrounded by his satisfied subjects, ministers, legitimate wife, sons, and brothers. Even Lord Sri Krishna praised his spirit of pious activities. He handed over his only daughter to Maharshi Angira, and by his good blessings, he was elevated to the kingdom of heaven. First of all, he wanted to offer the priesthood of his sacrifices to learned Brihaspati, but the demigod refused to accept the post because of the king's being a human being, a man of this earth. He was very sorry for this, but on the advice of Narada Muni, he appointed Samvarta to the post, and he was successful in his mission. The success of a particular type of sacrifice completely depends on the priest in charge. In this age, all kinds of sacrifice are forbidden because there is no learned priest amongst the so-called brahmanas, who go by the false notion of being brahmanas by virtue of being sons of brahmanas, but without brahminical qualifications. In this age of Kali, therefore, only one kind of sacrifice is recommended, Sankirtana Yagya, as inaugurated by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 34. By those riches, the king could procure the ingredients for 3 horse sacrifices. Thus the pious King Yudhishthira, who was very fearful after the battle of Kurukshetra, pleased Lord Hari, the personality of Godhead. Purport. Maharaj Yudhishthira was the ideal and celebrated pious king of the world. And still he was greatly afraid after the execution of the battle of Kurukshetra, because of the mass killing in the fight, all of which was done only to install him on the throne. He therefore took all of the responsibility for sins committed in the warfare, and to get rid of all these sins, he wanted to perform 3 sacrifices in which horses are offered at the altar. Such a sacrifice is very costly. Even Maharaj Yudhishthira had to collect the necessary heaps of gold left by Maharaj Maruta, and the Brahmanas who were given gold in charity by King Maruta. The learned Brahmanas could not take away all the loads of gold given by Maharaja Maruta, and therefore they left behind the major portion of the gift. And Maharaj Maruta also did not again collect such heaps of gold given away in charity. Besides that, all the golden plates and utensils which were used in the sacrifice were also thrown in the dustbins. For all such heaps of gold remained unclaimed, and all such heaps of gold remained unclaimed property for a long time, till Maharaj Yudhishthira collected them for his own purposes. Lord Sri Krishna advised the brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthira to collect the unclaimed property because it belonged to the king. The more astonishing thing is that no subject of the state also collected such unclaimed gold for industrial enterprise or anything like that. This means that the state citizens were completely satisfied with all necessities of life, and therefore not inclined to accept unnecessary, productive enterprises for sense gratification. Maharaj Yudhishthira also requisitioned the heaps of gold for performing sacrifices and for pleasing the Supreme Hari, personality of Godhead. Otherwise, he had no desire to collect them for the state treasury. One should take lessons from the acts of Maharaj Yudhishthira. He was afraid of sins committed on the battlefield, and therefore he wanted to satisfy the supreme authority. This indicates that unintentional sins are also committed in our daily occupational discharge of duties. And to counteract even such unintentional crimes, one must perform sacrifices as they are recommended in the revealed scriptures. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Jagyartat karmanonyatra lokoyam karmabandhanaha 3:9, that one must perform sacrifices recommended in the scriptures in order to get rid of commitments of all unauthorized work, or even unintentional crimes which we are apt to commit. By doing so, one shall be freed from all kinds of sins. And those who do not do so, but work for self-interest or sense gratification, have to undergo all tribulations accrued from committed sins. Therefore, the main purpose of performing sacrifices is to satisfy the Supreme Personality, Hari. The process of performing sacrifices may be different in terms of different times, places, and persons, but the aim of such sacrifices is one and the same at all times and in all circumstances. That is, satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, Hari. That is the way of pious life, and that is the way of peace and prosperity in the world at large. Maharaj Yudhishthira did all these as the ideal pious king of the world. If Maharaj Yudhishthira is a sinner in his daily discharge of duties, in royal administration of state affairs, wherein killing of man and animals is a recognized art, then we can just imagine the amount of sins committed consciously or unconsciously by the untrained population of the Kali Yuga, who are not performing any sacrifices to please the Supreme Lord. The Bhagavatam says, therefore, that the prime duty of the human being is to satisfy the Supreme Lord by the performance of one's occupational duty. Bhagavatam 1:2-13. How's this doing? Is it okay so far? Okay, good. Let any man of any place or community, caste or creed, be engaged in any sort of occupational duty, but he must agree to perform sacrifices as it is recommended in the scriptures for the particular place, time, and person. In the Vedic literatures, it is recommended that in Kali Yuga, people engage in glorifying the Lord by chanting the holy name of Krishna without offense. And that by doing so, one can be freed from all sins and thus can attain the highest perfection of life by returning home, back to Godhead. Kirtanad eva Krishnasya mukta sangha param brajet. We have already discussed this more than once in this great literature, in different places, especially in the introductory portion, by sketching the life of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And still, we are repeating the same, with a view to bring about peace and prosperity in society. The Lord has declared openly in Bhagavad Gita how he becomes pleased with us. And the same process is practically demonstrated in the life and preaching work of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The perfect process of performing yagyas, or sacrifice, to please the Supreme Lord Hari, the personality of Godhead, who gets us free from all miseries of existence, is to follow the ways of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this dark age of quarrel and dissension. Maharaj Yudhishthira had to collect heaps of gold to secure the paraphernalia for a horse sacrifice in the days of sufficiency. So we can hardly think of such performance of yagyas in these days of insufficiency and complete scarcity of gold. At the present moment, we have heaps of papers and promises of their being converted into gold by economic development of modern civilization. And still, there is no possibility of spending riches like Maharaj Yudhishthira, either individually or collectively, or by state patronization. Just suitable, therefore, for the age is the method recommended by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in terms of the Shastras. Such a method requires no expenditure at all, and yet can award more benefit than other expensive methods of yajna performances. The horse sacrifice yajna or cow sacrifice yajna performed by the Vedic regulations shouldn't be misunderstood as a process of killing animals. On the contrary, animals offered for the yajna were rejuvenated to a new span of life by the transcendental power of chanting the Vedic hymns, which, if properly chanted, are different from what is understood by the common layman. The Veda mantras are all practical, and the proof is rejuvenation of the sacrificed animal. In other words, in the presence of everyone, the animal was sacrificed and then came in a rejuvenated life. There is no possibility of such methodical chanting of the Vedic hymns by the so-called brahmanas or priests of the present age. The untrained descendants of the twice-born families are no more like their forefathers, and thus they are counted amongst the Shudras, or once-born men. The once-born man is unfit to chant the Vedic hymns, and therefore there is no practical utility of chanting the original hymns. And to save them all, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu propounded the Sankirtana movement or yajna for all practical purposes. And the people of the present age are strongly recommended to follow this sure and recognized path. Text 35. Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, being invited to the sacrifices of Maharaj Yudhishthira, saw to it that they were performed by qualified, twice-born brahmanas. After that, for the pleasure of the relatives, the Lord remained a few months. Purport. Lord Sri Krishna was invited by Maharaj Yudhishthira to look into the supervision of the performances of yajna, and the Lord, to abide by the orders of his elderly cousin, caused the performance of yajnas by learned twice-born brahmanas. Simply taking birth in the family of a brahmana does not make one qualified to perform yajnas. One must be twice-born by proper training and initiation from the bona fide acharya. The once-born scions of brahmana families are equal with the once-born shudras, and such brahmabandhus or unqualified once-born men have no right to accept the priesthood for performing any kind of fruitive sacrifice. Such once-born scions must be rejected for any purpose of religious or Vedic function. Lord Sri Krishna was entrusted to look after this arrangement, and perfect as he is, he caused the yajnas to be performed by the bona fide twice-born brahmanas for successful execution. Text 36. O Shaunaka, therefore the Lord, having bidden farewell to King Yudhishthira, Draupadi, and other relatives, started for the city of Dwarka, accompanied by Arjuna and members of the Yadu dynasty. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 12th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Birth of Emperor Pariksit. So now we continue with the more or less the introduction to the book before Shukadeva Goswami starts to recite the Bhagavatam to Maharaj Pariksit. Chapter 13. Dhritarashtra quits home. Text 1. Sri Sutta Goswami said, while traveling on pilgrimage, Vidura received knowledge of the destination of the self from the great sage Maitreya, and then returned to Hastinapura. He became well versed in the subject as he desired. He became as well versed in the subject as he desired. Purport. Vidura, one of the prominent figures in the history of the Mahabharata. He was conceived by Vyasadeva in the womb of the maidservant of Ambika, mother of Maharaj Pandu. He is the incarnation of Yamaraj. Being cursed by Manduka Muni, he was to become a Shudra. The story is narrated as follows. Once upon a time, the state police caught some thieves who had concealed themselves in the hermitage of Manduka Muni. The police constables, as usual, arrested all the thieves and Manduka Muni along with them. The magistrate specifically punished the Muni to death by being pierced with a lance. When he was just to be pierced, the news reached the king, and he at once stopped the act on consideration of his being a great Muni. The king personally begged the Muni's pardon for the mistake of his men, and the saint at once went to Yamaraj, who prescribes the destiny of the living beings. Yamaraja, being questioned by the Muni, replied that the Muni in his childhood pierced an ant with a sharpened straw, and for that reason he was put into difficulty. The Muni thought it unwise on the part of Yamaraja that he was punished for his childish innocence, and thus the Muni cursed Yamaraja to become a Shudra, and this Shudra incarnation of Yamaraja was known as Vidura, the Shudra brother of Dhritarashtra and Maharaj Pandu. But this Shudra son of the Kuru dynasty was equally treated by Bhishma Deva, along with his other nephews, and in due course Vidura was married with a girl who was also begotten in the womb of a Shudrani by a Brahmana. Although Vidura did not inherit the property of his father, the brother of Bhishma Deva, still he was given sufficient state property by Dhritarashtra, the elder brother of Vidura. Vidura was very much attached to his elder brother, and all along he tried to guide him on the right path. During the fratricidal war of Kurukshetra, Vidura repeatedly implored his elder brother to do justice to the sons of Pandu, but Duryodhana did not like such interference by his uncle, and thus he practically insulted Vidura. This resulted in Vidura's leaving home for pilgrimage and taking instructions from Maitreya. Text 2. After asking various questions and becoming established in the transcendental loving service of Lord Krishna, Vidura retired from putting questions to Maitreya Muni. Purport. Vidura retired from putting questions before Maitreya Muni when he was convinced by Maitreya Muni Rishi that the summum bonum of life is to be finally situated in the transcendental loving service of Lord Sri Krishna, who is Govinda, or one who satisfies his devotees in all respects. The conditioned soul, the living being in material existence, seeks happiness by employing his senses in the modes of materialism, but that cannot give him satisfaction. He then searches after the supreme truth by the empiric, philosophic, speculative method and intellectual feats. But if he does not find the ultimate goal, he again goes down to material activities and engages himself in various philanthropic and altruistic works, which all fail to give him satisfaction. So neither fruitive activities nor dry philosophical speculation can give one satisfaction, because by nature a living being is the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, and all the Vedic literatures give him direction towards that ultimate end. The Bhagavad Gita 15:15 confirms this statement. Like Vidura, an inquisitive conditioned soul must approach a bona fide spiritual master like Maitreya, and by intelligent inquiries must try to know everything about karma, fruitive activities, jnana, philosophical research for the supreme truth, and yoga, the linking process of spiritual realization. One who is not seriously inclined to put questions before a spiritual master need not accommodate a show bottle spiritual master, nor should a person who may be a spiritual master for others pose to be so if he is unable to engage his disciple ultimately in the transcendental loving service of Lord Sri Krishna. Vidura was successful in approaching such a spiritual master like Maitreya, and he got the ultimate goal of life, bhakti unto Govinda. Thus there was nothing to be known further about spiritual progress. Text 3 and 4. When they saw Vidura return to the palace, all the inhabitants, Maharaj Yudhishthir, his younger brothers Dhritarashtra, Satyaki, Sanjaya, Kripacharya, Kunti, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, Uttara, Kripi, many other wives of the Kauravas, and other ladies with children, all hurried to him in great delight. It so appeared that they had regained their consciousness after a long period. Purport. Gandhari, the ideal chaste lady in the history of the world. She was the daughter of Maharaj Subala, the king of Gandhara, now Kandahar in Kabul, that's Afghanistan. And in her maiden state, she worshipped Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is generally worshipped by Hindu maidens to get a good husband. Gandhari satisfied Lord Shiva, and by his benediction to obtain 100 sons, she was betrothed to Dhritarashtra, despite his being blind forever. When Gandhari came to know that her would-be husband was a blind man, to follow her life companion, she decided to become voluntarily blind. So she wrapped up her eyes with many silken linens, and she was married to Dhritarashtra under the guidance of her elder brother, Shakuni. She was the most beautiful girl of her time, and she was equally qualified by her womanly qualities, which endeared every member of the Kaurava court. But despite all her good qualities, she had the natural frailties of a woman, and she was envious of Kunti when the latter gave birth to a male child. Both the queens were pregnant, but Kunti first gave birth to a male child. Thus Gandhari became angry and gave a blow to her own abdomen. As a result, she gave birth to a lump of flesh only. But since she was a devotee of Vyasadeva, by the instruction of Vyasadeva, the lump was divided into 100 parts, and each part gradually developed to become a male child. Thus her ambition to become the mother of 100 sons was fulfilled, and she began to nourish all the children according to her exalted position. When the intrigue of the battle of Kurukshetra was going on, she was not in favor of fighting with the Pandavas. Rather, she blamed Dhritarashtra, her husband, for such a fratricidal war. She desired that the state be divided into 2 parts, for the sons of Pandu and her own. She was very affected when all her sons died in the battle of Kurukshetra, and she wanted to curse Bhimasena and Yudhishthira, but she was checked by Vyasadeva. Her mourning over the death of Duryodhana and Dushasana before Lord Krishna was very pitiful, and Lord Krishna pacified her by transcendental messages. She was equally aggrieved on the death of Karna, and she described to Lord Krishna the lamentation of Karna's wife. She was pacified by Srila Vyasadeva when he showed her dead sons, then promoted to the heavenly kingdoms. She died along with her husband in the jungles of the Himalayas near the mouth of the Ganges. She burned in a forest fire. Maharaj Yudhishthira performed the death ceremony of his uncle and aunt. Pritha, daughter of Maharaj Shurasena and sister of Vasudeva, Lord Krishna's father. Later she was adopted by Maharaj Kunti Bhoja, and hence she is known as Kunti. She is the incarnation of the success potency of the Supreme Godhead, Personality of Godhead. The heavenly denizens from the upper planets used to visit the palace of King Yudhishthira, and Kunti was engaged for their reception. She also served the great mystic sage Durvasa, and being satisfied by her faithful service, Durvasa Muni gave her a mantra by which it was possible for her to call any demigod she pleased. As a matter of inquisitiveness, she at once called for the sun god, who desired couplement with her, but she declined. But the sun god assured her immunity from virgin adulteration, and so she agreed to his proposal. As a result of this couplement, she became pregnant, and Karna was born by her. By the grace of the sun, she again turned into a virgin girl, but being afraid of her parents, she quitted the newborn child, Karna. And after that, when she actually selected her own husband, she preferred Pandu to be her husband. Maharaj Pandu later wanted to retire from family life and adopted the renounced order of life. Kunti refused to follow her husband to adopt such life, but at last Maharaj Pandu gave her permission to become a mother of sons by calling some other suitable personalities. Kunti did not accept this proposal at first, but when vivid examples were set by Pandu, she agreed. Thus, by dint of the mantra awarded by Durvasa Muni, she called for Dharmaraj, and thus Yudhishthira was born. She called for the demigod Vayu, air, and thus Bhima was born. She called for Indra, the king of heaven, and thus Arjuna was born. The other 2 sons, namely Nakula and Sahadeva, were begotten by Pandu himself in the womb of Madri. Later on, Maharaj Pandu died at an early age, for which Kunti was so aggrieved that she fainted. Two co-wives, namely Kunti and Madri, decided that Kunti should live for the maintenance of the 5 minor children, the Pandavas, and Madri should accept the sati rituals by meeting voluntary death along with her husband. This agreement was endorsed by great sages like Shatashringa and others present on the occasion. Later on, when the Pandavas were banished from the kingdom by the intrigues of Duryodhana, Kunti followed her sons, and she equally faced all sorts of difficulties during those days. During the forest fire, one demon girl, Hidimba, wanted Bhima as her husband. Bhima refused, but when the girl approached Kunti and Yudhishthira, they ordered Bhima to accept her proposal and give her a son. As a result of this combination, Gatotkacha was born, and he fought very valiantly with his father against the Kauravas. In their forest life, they lived with a Brahmana family that was in trouble because of one Bakasura demon. And Kunti ordered Bhima to kill the Bakasura to protect the Brahmana family against troubles created by the demon. She advised Yudhishthira to start for the Panchala Desha. Draupadi was gained in this Panchala Desha by Arjuna, but by order of Kunti, all 5 of the Pandava brothers became equally the husbands of Panchali, or Draupadi. She was married with 5 Pandavas in the presence of Vyasadeva. Kunti Devi never forgot her first child, Karna, and after Karna's death in the battle of Kurukshetra, she lamented and admitted before her other sons that Karna was her eldest son prior to her marriage with Maharaj Pandu. Her prayers for the Lord after the battle of Kurukshetra, when Lord Krishna was going back home, are excellently explained. Later she went to the forest with Gandhari for severe penance. She used to take meals after every 30 days. She finally sat down in profound meditation and later burned to ashes in a forest fire. Draupadi, the most chaste daughter of Maharaj Drupada, and partly an incarnation of goddess Sachi, the wife of Indra. Maharaj Drupada performed a great sacrifice under the superintendence of the sage Yajna. Wait a second. It is now through 7:30. I'm supposed to start now. Right? Referee, you didn't blow your whistle.
I was going to wait till it's purport.
You were so absorbed. Yeah. How long have we got to go? There's a lot. No, there's a lot. We'll start right here and we'll hear about Draupadi. Notice how we're hearing about the most exalted females in the history of the world in this purport, and all their qualities and adventures and everything. Very nice. Okay, we'll stop here with the reading. We're halfway through the purport of text 4. All right, following my doctor's orders and the orders of all my loved ones, I'm stopping right now and asking for reflections. Anyone, there's wonderful points in these purports. Yes, Hannah.
What do they do with the bodies of animals once they sacrifice them?
They were burned, but I mean, there isn't any exact description of this, but Prabhupada indicated to us that they didn't really die. They went into a fire, and then the rejuvenated animal would come out of the fire. So the soul just came out in a new body, in a renewed, rejuvenated body.
In that moment?
Yeah. And sometimes they would go immediately into a human body.
Depending on what?
Various, I don't know the details. You'd have to go into the details of the karmakanda rituals and everything. It's like, I've never heard that. I have to research.
Another thing.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be?
It's partly due to the nature of the sacrifice. Because some sacrifices were very, very exalted, especially the horse and cow sacrifice, Ashwamedha, Anyway, go ahead.
What does it mean to be once or twice born?
Twice born means to be initiated, to receive the Gayatri mantra, and in our case the Maha Mantra, by a bona fide Brahmana spiritual master. And once born means that you haven't received that initiation. Damodarji. Dr. Damodarji.
The previous chapter, text 34, in purport section it says that Maharaj Yudhishthira was very afraid of sin committed on the battlefield and therefore he wanted to satisfy the supreme authority. Two questions came in my mind that time. Either the Krishna was, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was present there throughout and everything happened with his sanction. He spoke that in Bhagavad Gita. So he wanted to satisfy the Supreme Authority, though Supreme Authority was with him, and first thing. Second thing is like either he did not know that he is a Supreme Authority, that's why he was performing the sacrifice and offering and taking the help of the Supreme Personality to do those sacrifices.
This is the unlimited compassion of a Vaishnava. Yudhishthira, at the end of the battle, was feeling guilty. And at the beginning of the battle, Arjuna was anticipating the guilt and the confusion that would be caused by all those men losing their lives, and all the widows that would be left, and all of the social sacrifices and welfare activities of the families generally do to keep human society pious and religious, and therefore peace in the world. So it's a little difficult to understand. It has to do with the quality of love of God. There are different qualities of love of God. And in these levels of God, the love of God, sometimes a devotee who was in love with Krishna in a very intimate way, friendship in this case, they would forget in the heat of the battle or the heat of the day-to-day, just like Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, he prays in the 11th chapter when Krishna reveals the universal form to Arjuna. One of the prayers that Arjuna made was, "Please forgive me for things that I might have said to you, not understanding that you are actually God." So it's not that on that level, pure devotees in intimacy may forget that Krishna is the Lord. And therefore, but even in those levels of relationships, the devotees will worship Vishnu, or they'll worship Narayana, or they'll worship another incarnation like Varaha or Vamana or Nishinga or like that. They were deities of these personalities of Godhead in the houses even of the Brajbasis. So you can say that in a sense Krishna's not God because he doesn't have anything to do with the creation of the universe. The Vishnu incarnations the Vishnu expansions are God in the common sense or the ordinary sense of the word. So therefore, when they fear God in their pious daily lives and ritual sacrifices and all these things, which also go on even in Brajadam, they were worshipping Lord Narayana or Vishnu. Whenever Krishna would get into some trouble, when some demon would come to try to kill Krishna, Mother Yashoda would get out, a yak tail or cows, the bunches of hair of the cow, and dust him over with the dust of the cows, and then say mantras, Vishnu mantras, on every part of his body, so that he could become protected. This is love, pure love, spontaneous love, in which the devotee is forgetful that her son or lover or friend is actually God. But from time to time, it becomes obvious. Mother Yashoda looked in the mouth of Krishna and saw the whole universe, and plus saw herself with Krishna in the mouth of Krishna. Just as she was standing there with Krishna, she saw herself standing with Krishna in the mouth of Krishna. So for a moment she became bewildered and she thought, oh, this is some kind of, maybe I've gone mad, I've got some mental disease, and then she says, no, I'm fit. I don't have a mental disease. I'm not doing crazy things. And then she said, well, maybe my son isn't an ordinary person. And then even the idea flashed in her mind, maybe he's God. But then, immediately, Krishna said, oh, that's going to ruin everything. If she thinks I'm God, how will I be able to play with her? How will I be able to enjoy being her son? And how will she be able to enjoy being my mother? So then he covered that, He allowed Yogamaya to cover that realization. So it's not that the pure devotees and the eternal associates of Krishna don't know that he's God. They know, but their remembrance of him as God or as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is covered or dominated, or their affection and the sweetness of their affection eclipses their feelings of awe and reverence and fear and all those things that come when you're in the presence of God. That's why in Vaikuntha, there's a different mood, there's a different atmosphere. The devotees there are very reverential, they're very careful how they deal with Vishnu, When Gopakumar, in the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, he finally reached Vishnu in Vaikuntha, and when he saw Vishnu, because his relationship with the Lord was as a cowherd boy, and therefore his deity was Gopal, was Krishna. So when he saw Vishnu, he saw Krishna, and he just went running to him with his arms open, and he was going to embrace him. And all of the Vaikuntha Vasis, they stopped him. You can't do that here. This is the Lord of Vaikuntha. And then he fell unconscious at the feet of Vishnu. And then there's a very, very famous speech that Vishnu gave, because he was calling his name. Because not only did Gopakumar see Vishnu as Krishna, Vishnu could not keep his mood as Vishnu. And then he called out to Gopakumar, oh, I've been waiting for you for so long. Where have you been? You've been cheating me all these years and lifetimes. Wake up, come over here, sit here. And then some of the Vaikuntha Vasis said, no, what's going on? And then they became confused, and there was a big debate between some of them thought it was okay, some of them thought it wasn't okay. So this is the differences between the love of eternal associates of Krishna in friendship and love of the Vaikuntha Vasis. in also sometimes in friendship, but very reserved friendship, very formal friendship. Does that answer anything?
Yes, Maharaj. I have 3 points.
Prabhupada. Prabhupada's mercy. Oh, what is it? 7:43. Thank you. I got 2 minutes, and then I turn into a pumpkin. Yes.
So Maharaj, Kunti Maharani also.
So Kunti Maharani also
Born in the forest fire.
burned in the forest fire. Yes. Yes. Sometimes you hear different accounts of that and other incidents that were from another day of Brahma. In the Vedas, in some Puranas, there are different accounts of different incidents that happen in different days of Brahma. And they may be a little different, you know, but the essential things are all the same. Doesn't change the actual point being made in history. So sometimes it is said that she did the sati rite, and sometimes it's said that she was burned in a forest fire. In Gandhari's case, it's not clear, because Dhritarashtra, anyway, we'll hear about this. I don't want to spoil the what's going to happen in a few more verses. We'll hear about what happened in a few more verses. To Dhritarashtra, when Vidura came home, his brother, and gave him some good advice. "30 seconds. Go ahead."
So, the devotees that come as Krishna's associates whenever he incarnated onto earth. So, for example, his mother was in the mood of what kind of love of God is that?
He has 2 mothers when he comes to the earth. His real mother means birth mother.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he wasn't born,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't come out of the vagina like a normal person, but he came from the heart. He appeared in the heart of Vasudeva, and then from the heart of Vasudeva he went into the heart of Devaki. And she appeared to be pregnant, but that's what actually happened. And then he appeared from the inside the body, outside, without going through the regular birth process. And he appeared in 4 hands with full Vishnu decoration. So the lesson is, and then when Devaki, the birth mother, was afraid because Kamsa had killed 6 of her sons before that, and out of pure, same answered here, out of pure maternal affection, even though she knew that he was Vishnu, she knew that he was God, because he appeared to them right in front of them in 4 hands, and he said, "Please, if you look like this, everyone's going to know, and therefore Kamsa will come and kill you. That means it's mixed, you know. If he's really Vishnu and kill him, nobody's going to kill him, but it's mixed. So the motherly love of Vasudeva Krishna is like that. It's mixed. Sometimes the associates, eternal associates, will see Krishna as 4-handed. Sometimes it's 2-handed. Sometimes overwhelmed by a similar love, but not quite as spontaneous as in Braj. And then Krishna, in order to please his mother, shrunk his form down into a baby, just looking like a human baby. And Vasudeva then carried him over to the other side of the Yamuna, put him on the lap of Yashoda, who had just given birth to a female child, Yogamaya, and then brought back the female child. Yeah. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, this is a little intimate, esoteric truth. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he, Hare Krishna, Haribol, nice to see you. He proposes that when Mother Yashoda gave birth, she gave birth to a male and a female child, Krishna and Yogamaya, but not Vasudeva Krishna, but original Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan Krishna. So then, when Vasudeva brought Krishna over, and he put in the lap of Mother Yashoda, that form merged into the original form of Krishna. And then he took the female child, Yogamaya. So Krishna, in his original form, he never leaves Vrindavan. He never takes a step out of Vrindavan. And any other form of his that you see outside of Vrindavan, they are expansions of his original form. But they're the same person, and they're the exact same form, but sometimes they'll look a little different. They'll sometimes have 4 arms, or sometimes like that.
So my question was...
You did many more than 30 seconds.
But I didn't even finish my question.
Yeah, I know, but we made a deal here. Okay, go ahead.
So the role that they come and play, like for example, Mother Yashoda is an exalted soul, you said that whenever Krishna comes, his associates come with him, and only his pure devotees can be associates, in his pastime.
In his intimate associates, mother, father, blood relatives, those kinds of things, are all expansions of the original forms of those relatives from Braj, from Vrindavan. Just like when he goes out, he expands his form as Vasudeva Krishna, and then again, Vasudeva, then again, Chaturvyuha, and then Balaram expands himself into all the expansions of Vishnu. But all of these expansions are expansions of Krishna. But when we say expansions, we don't mean that there was a time when they didn't exist. There was a time when they weren't expanded. They've always been expanded. They're eternally expanded. They always exist eternally. It's just when we say expansion, we mean in relationship to, relations, in terms of relationship, not in terms of, anyway, you got the idea. So what was the question again?
So, like you just said, because of their expansion.
Yes. Then like mother, like the queens of Krishna, they're actually expansions of the gopis of Vrindavan.
So
Mother Yashoda, Devaki is an actual expansion of Mother Yashoda. But when we say expansion, they are eternally. Mother Devaki is eternally there in Mathura, in the spiritual world. But when they come to the material world, then those relationships need to be adjusted so that they appear to be human-like.
that was my question. I was going to ask in connection
Yes.
to the spiritual world if they're
Yes,
the same
yes,
in the spiritual
because in the material world, Krishna agrees to act like a human being. Even though sometimes he does superhuman feats, he still agrees in the normal course of daily activities to act like a human being. To follow the rules of nature that he created. He's not duty bound to do that, but he does that voluntarily. And now I got to stop. Otherwise, I'm already a pumpkin. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Yudhishthira Maharaj ki jai. Shri Vidura ki jai.